Good evening. You're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Iran's president is tonight apologising to the state's Middle Eastern neighbours, claiming they will no longer be targeted unless they attack first. This as Donald Trump threatens another wave of, quote, very hard strikes and downplays reports that Moscow is handing intelligence to Tehran. More in just a moment. But first, the latest headlines. Viktor Orbán ratchets up tensions with Kyiv in a bid to claw back support ahead of next month's election. Volodymyr Zelenskyy reveals Ukraine is hit by 480 Russian drones in just one night. And Iceland faces a now or never referendum on EU accession. But we begin in Tehran, where Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says neighbouring countries will no longer be attacked unless they are a source of strikes on Tehran. Despite that, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are all reporting missile or drone strikes tonight, seemingly at direct odds with Pezeshkian's promise. And at the same time, Donald Trump says more American attacks are on the way. Konrad Gorlinski reports.
These were the scenes overnight in Tehran as the war enters its second week this Saturday morning. Last night, U.S. President Donald Trump, in his usual fashion, boasted the military progress being made in Iran.
Iran were doing very well. Somebody said, how would you score it from 0 to 10? I said, I'd give it a 12 to a 15.
The American military has released images of the destruction of key Iranian military installations. According to Trump, Iran's military capabilities have been reduced to the bare bones.
Their army is gone. They're just about, look, their navy is gone. Their communications are gone. Their leaders are gone. 2 sets of their leaders are gone. They're down to their 3rd set. Their air force is wiped out entirely.
Another drone. Oh my God.
Despite the damage, Iranian forces managed to strike several targets in Gulf countries overnight. In Dubai, flights had only just resumed at the city's airport before being temporarily suspended again following an early morning strike. Further north in Basra, Iraq, offices and warehouses belonging to U.S. oil services companies Halliburton and KBR were also hit overnight. Elsewhere in the region, Saudi Arabia says it intercepted and destroyed 2 ballistic missiles launched towards an airbase, while Qatar reported shooting down 9 drones during the night. And a recent report in the Washington Post suggested Russia may have been supplying Tehran with targeting information for some of these attacks. In an interview for CBS News, however, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth largely downplayed its significance, whether true or not, adding that the only ones that need to be worried right now are the Iranians. And they may indeed be worried. This Saturday afternoon, President Masoud Pezeshkian declared that Iran's Temporary Leadership Council had approved a suspension of attacks against countries in the Gulf.
We didn't intend to violate neighboring countries' territory. As I have said many times, they are our brothers. We stand with these ones we love in the region. We must join hands and establish peace and tranquility, and I hope that these events and the decision that we made yesterday and our Interim Leadership Council will help achieve this.
Now, how far those assurances will go or why they were made now remains unclear. President Trump offered his own interpretation in a post on Truth Social.
Iran, which is being beat to hell, has apologized and surrendered to its Middle East neighbors and promised that it will not shoot at them anymore. This promise was only made because of the relentless U.S. and Israeli attack.
Whatever the reasoning behind Tehran's move, any halt in attacks on its Arab neighbors would be welcome news for businesses across the Gulf and for the hundreds of thousands of travelers still stranded at airports throughout the region. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski remains cautious, however, as fresh Iranian attacks are still being reported across the GCC, signaling a possible split emerging within the Iranian leadership.
The president of Iran has announced that Iran will stop attacking the countries of the Persian Gulf. Unfortunately, our representatives have not yet confirmed this, as it seems that this announcement is firstly conditional and secondly not being implemented. In some countries, drones are still flying, and rockets are still exploding.
Meanwhile, the Polish government continues evacuation flights from the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. So far, more than 4,500 Polish citizens have returned home, with the foreign ministry saying around 1,000 people a day are now being evacuated from the Emirates alone. For TVP World, I'm Conrad Gorlinski.
And we'll break all of this down with David D'Amato, retired US Army counterintelligence officer, later on World News Tonight. 7 Ukrainian bank workers detained by Hungarian authorities have been released and returned to their homeland. The arrests triggered a political furore between Budapest and Kyiv as the Russia-friendly Viktor Orbán, who's trailing well behind in the polls, uses Ukraine as a hot-button issue ahead of next month's election. Kazimierz Wysiak explains.
The 7 Ukrainian bank workers detained by Hungary earlier this week have now been released.
We were able to secure the release of 7 Ukrainian nationals who were held in Budapest. They're already safe, and they have crossed the Ukrainian border.
But this dispute is far from over, and it's not just about these workers or the money they were transporting through Hungary. Pro-Russian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has made Ukraine the central point of his election campaign.
Last night, the Hungarian people sent a message. They do not want a pro-Ukraine government, and they do not want a pro-Ukraine prime minister in Hungary.
Orbán has been trying to paint his main rival, pro-Western Peter Magyar, as someone who would drag Hungary into a war with Russia. With just a month left before the election, Magyar and his TISA party have been dominating the ruling Fidesz in pre-election polls. That's one of the reasons why Prime Minister Orbán is doing his best to divert attention away from the underperforming economy and towards escalating tensions with Kyiv.
We hope that one specific person in the European Union will not block the €90 billion so that Ukrainian soldiers have weapons. Otherwise, we will give the address of that person to our armed forces.
Mr. President, I received your message. You threatened me with soldiers, and through me, the whole of Hungary.
The veiled threat from the Ukrainian president forced Peter Magyar to take a stand as well.
Let me make it clear that no one, not a single Hungarian, can be threatened by a foreign head of state.
Orbán is clearly using this as some kind of leverage, and Zelenskyy, unfortunately, instead of just waiting it out for the next 3-4 weeks before the election, it seems to me he fell into the trap.
Still, it's Viktor Orbán who's seen in the European Union as the black sheep of the bloc.
To me, it's shocking that Hungary, which was once a victim of Soviet aggression, today seems to be more sympathetic towards the aggressor in the war in Ukraine than the victim.
And while Orbán tries to instill fear of Ukrainians in Hungarian society, his opponent points to the Prime Minister's close relations with Russia as the bigger threat.
According to information from multiple sources, agents of the Russian military intelligence services arrived in Budapest weeks ago with the aim of influencing the outcome of the Hungarian elections. It is utterly unprecedented that a government on the brink of collapse is attempting to influence the Hungarian elections through foreign interference in its own interests.
Hungarians will cast their votes on April 12 in one of the most consequential elections in Europe in 2026, as it could turn one of Ukraine's biggest opponents in the EU into another one of Kyiv's allies. For TVP World, Kazimierz Wysiak.
At least 10 people are dead, including 2 children, after a brutal overnight air assault hit the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. In fact, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Moscow launched a total of 480 drones and 29 missiles, targeting both civilian and critical infrastructure across the country. Randy Potts reports.
In Kharkiv, a Russian ballistic missile slammed directly into a 5-story apartment building, resulting in many deaths, including that of a 9-year-old boy. One local resident rushed to help as soon as she could.
When we arrived here 20 minutes after the explosion, I thought I was going to have a stroke. I couldn't string 2 words together and my legs were buckling. I couldn't say anything at all.
Another woke to the sound of her terrified cats.
I was asleep. I woke up and everything was covered in dust. The first thing I heard was my cats freaking out, and I decided that I had to get up, pack my things quickly and run away.
Local officials in Kharkiv say the victims included a primary school teacher and her young son, while several others remain missing under the rubble. In the city of Kramatorsk, a heavy guided aerial bomb struck the central district, killing one person and wounding 3 children. A 3-month-old baby was among those injured in Zaporizhia after Russian shelling damaged multiple high-rise buildings and residential homes. Drone strikes in Sumy hit an office building and a playground, while infrastructure in the southern port of Odessa also sustained significant damage. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy reported that Russia launched hundreds of drones and missiles on Saturday.
Russia used 29 missiles, nearly half of them ballistic, and 480 drones, most of them Shaheds, against Ukraine. They targeted energy infrastructure in Kyiv, the Khmelnytsky and Chernivtsi regions, and the railway in the Zhytomyr region.
On the minds of many Ukrainians is the urgency to acquire more U.S. Patriot missile systems, which could have helped prevent Russian strikes like these, but are now being deployed to the Middle East.
The situation is that during four years of large-scale invasion, larger amount of missiles could have been already produced, which wasn't the case yet. And the majority of these missiles were just preserved in the stockpiles and now just gone within less than a week when it comes to the situation in the Middle East.
Ukraine continues to test new UAVs. In Odessa, the Magura naval drone is expected to be able to detect incoming targets on land from hundreds of kilometers away and intercept them almost immediately. For TVP World, Randy Potts.
Iceland will soon face a now or never vote on whether to resume negotiations to join the European Union. The referendum, which is set to take place at the end of August, comes after Reykjavik abandoned talks back in 2013, with the current government promising to put the issue to the public before next year. Gabriela Jelonek has more.
Should negotiations on Iceland's accession to the European Union continue? That's the question Icelanders will have to answer by the end of this summer. But it isn't the first time this island nation is considering joining the EU. Reykjavik abandoned European bloc membership talks in 2013 after 4 years of negotiations. But as the new Gallup opinion poll has shown, now 57% of the population backs restarting EU membership talks.
It will be up to our nation to decide at the end of the summer. So this is a process that simply depends on the will of the Icelandic people.
According to the poll, Icelanders are increasingly concerned about safety in the Arctic region, in particular as Russia's invasion of Ukraine drags on, but also due to repeated threats by US President Donald Trump to annex nearby Greenland.
Now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not.
The rise of the cost of living and tariff hikes imposed by the United States on Icelandic goods have also made the question of EU membership more pressing.
Geopolitical situation, of course, has an impact, but mostly this is about our relationship and role within Europe, not the US. It is also about the trade environment.
Iceland is a NATO member and part of the EU's single market, the Schengen Open Border Travel Zone and the European Free Trade Association. But the question about preferential conditions for joining the EU remains open. Among those who fear a negative impact of joining the bloc are farmers and members of Iceland's fishing industry. Both wonder if Brussels officials will force fishermen to share the North Arctic waters with boats from the other EU member states.
There will be a lot of discussion on how the negotiations will go, what can be negotiated, is there anything to negotiate. The fact is, there are no two agreements that the European Union has made with other nations that are completely identical.
Also, other non-EU countries like Liechtenstein and Norway are already aligned with much of the EU bloc's legislation. Just before the meeting of foreign ministers of the Baltic Sea states in Warsaw on Wednesday, TVP World's news director Adam Jasser spoke with the Norwegian foreign minister and asked if Norway is possibly reconsidering EU accession.
What we have done instead is that we have established a position as the most connected outsider, or the country that is most in without being into the EU, and most Norwegians seem to be happy with that for now. Let's put it this way, we will follow with interest how that story develops.
The current Icelandic government says that if the EU referendum fails, the matter will be closed for good. For now, the future of this Arctic island is in the hands of its almost 400,000 inhabitants who will vote on August 29th. For TVP World, Gabriela Jelonek.
Over in Germany, a regional election in the southwestern state of Baden-Württemberg is shaping up as a litmus test for Chancellor Friedrich Merz and his governing coalition. It's the first of 5 state votes this year, with Merz hoping for a boost for his conservative Christian Democratic Union as he aims to push through national reforms. Our correspondent Sascha Fabach reports from Stuttgart.
We're in Baden-Württemberg. Now, this is a place perhaps not known, but there are big brands that have done well here for Germany, big auto brands. If we're looking at Porsche, if we're looking at Mercedes, but also other big names like Bosch. Big industry here that impacts all of Germany. Now, this is why this matters also for the coalition in Berlin. This is home territory for CDU, those Christian Democrats that are governing right now, and in a coalition with the SPD. Now, they're supposed to do well here. The SPD here, not so much. They're trailing far behind, well below, around 8% if we're looking at some of those polls, and that could have ramifications down the line, especially for the coalition. Another one on the horizon, the AfD. Now, they've been doing well. If we go back to the federal elections last year in the east of Germany, in the north, but that's traditional home territory. Now here, if they do well here, a few years ago, they got to around 9%. They're supposed to be getting likely between 14, 15, maybe in some polls up to 20%. Now that could really put pressure on the government in Berlin and be a big sign that the AfD is making inroads also in Western state. Remember, industry is big here. Now we asked and talked to certain voters here across Stuttgart, and let's just hear what they had to say. What are their main issues for this election?
Especially for us as teachers, education is really important because we are right now experience a lot of children who are not very well supported, especially here in Stuttgart.
We need more support for people from other countries. They need more, for example, help with documents, integration. Yeah, if they don't get it, it's hard for them to have a good time here in Germany.
I think most of the people are concerned about the economic situation and the automotive industry. For me as a student, I have more concerns about the affordable housing and the official transportation.
Now with that also to know, I mean, apart from those issues, this marks one of 5 key so-called super elections this year will happen in Germany. In just about less than 2 weeks' time, also nearby, also will be pressure, and also in eastern Germany later on. So this was going to matter here, will matter all across Germany. There's much to play for, and not only Baden-Württemberg, but Berlin and Germany will be watching. Sascha Fabach for TVP World in Stuttgart.
Come next year, the United Nations will have a new Secretary General, marking a transition from the current man in charge, Antonio Guterres. But it's a deeply political battle, with the final green light needed from all 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, including Russia. And as our Africa correspondent Sophia Ba explains, former Senegalese President Macky Sall is one of the leading candidates in the mix.
A new Secretary General of the United Nations will be appointed on January 1st, 2027 to succeed to Antonio Guterres, with 3 current nominations on the table. Former Senegalese President Macky Sall, plus former Chilean President Michelle Bachelet, and the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Argentine Rafael Grossi.
The President of the General Assembly has received a new nomination for the SG selection process. It is Macky Sall, the former President of Senegal. He was nominated by the Republic of Burundi, who presented their papers this morning. And the President of the General Assembly and the President of the Security Council will inform member states jointly and circulate the information and communication that we have received shortly.
The current composition of the Council could be favorable to Sall, as 3 African members are sitting on this seat here: the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and Somalia. While the entire Security Council will elect the next Secretary General, its 5 permanent members, France, the United Kingdom, China, the United States, and Russia, will ultimately be the deciders, as they have power of veto. while Macky Sall led Senegal from 2012 to 2024, the current government accuses him of covering up unfavorable economic data and concealing the true extent of the country's fiscal problems. Senegal charged 4 former government ministers from Sall's cabinet with corruption and embezzlement related to management of COVID-19 funds under a wider anti-corruption campaign by current President Bassirou Diomaye Faye. I'm Sophia Ba, reporting from Dakar, Senegal, for TVP World.
And joining me now is David D'Abato, retired US Army counterintelligence officer and geopolitical analyst. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Now, I want to start with the country's President Pezeshkian apologising to the Gulf nations, saying, look, neighbouring states will no longer be struck if they are not hitting Iran. But then we're also hearing reports from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, as we go to air tonight, that they've been hit today. So is the president of Iran really speaking for the leadership?
I believe that he is. But look, let me just say there's been a lot of discussion about why Iran may have been hitting its Gulf neighbors and whether or not this was a mistake, whether or not this was a strategy of theirs. And I've actually spoken about this, and I think that it was a strategy. I think they're taking a page out of the Russian and even the Soviet playbook, which is to plant chaos, to seed the area in chaos. It's also payback for the Gulf states, as far as Iran is concerned, for helping Israel, for siding with some of them, actually opening diplomatic relations with Israel, and for hosting several American military bases. So I think it's a strategy of theirs. Now, whether or not that was a wise strategy in the long term, well, remains to be seen. But yes, I think this was a strategy. I think he does speak for the leadership. And I think we're going to see those wind down, though, very, very soon, if not right away.
So you do think they will wind down? Because that was going to be my next question, as to whether or not those armed forces actually listen and rein it in, because it seems the president is wanting to find a compromise. So I'm curious as to whether or not those around him really will be convinced to follow that lead.
Well, let me just answer that in this way. A lot of people don't realize, that don't study this for a living or aren't that interested, that the Iranian military and even the Ayatollahs don't totally control Iran. They are not the power structure in Iran. That's the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are a paramilitary force behind the force. They actually have far more weapons and far more control over what Iran does than even the Ayatollahs. So a lot of this may be their call. So whether or not the president speaks for them, that I can't say. And whether or not these strikes do ramp up in the future and don't die out, as I think they will, it really depends on what happens in the next few days in terms of Israel and the United States, how they proceed in their attacks against Iran.
So this could end up in a bit of a split between the regime, let's say the president, and the military corps.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the IRGC is the power, as I said, in Iran, and they are the most devout, the most hard-line folks in Iran. They call the shots. They don't just control the military or the intelligence services. They control the infrastructure. They control the finances. They control pretty much every facet of Iranian life, education, and so forth. So they are going to be the ones to not only call the next shots, probably the ones that are going to approve the next leader, the political leader of Iran. And depending on who that is, that will show which way this war goes. What is Iran going to do as far as their strategy with the new leader, and how much power the IRGC can carve out with the new regime.
So Donald Trump again calling for an unconditional surrender. Given what you mentioned just there, I mean, can change truly happen in Iran without America deploying some kind of troops on the ground? Or is that the role that the United States is hoping will be played by Kurdish forces backed by the CIA?
Well, let me just say this, and it's been said by many, many people, not just me. Continuing airstrikes and air power alone are not going to result in regime change. As I said, the IRC is the folks that really do control what's going on the ground in a country of 93 million people. The Americans and the Israelis can absolutely pulverize every military installation in Iran, all of the missile sites, all of the air bases, all of the military bases, and they still will not control what's going on the ground. The IRGC, they control the country. They control every street corner. They control every agency and government facility in Iran. They are going to control the country, whether or not Israel or America keeps the air campaign up. So, to answer the question that you asked, though, is Trump going to order ground troops into Iran? If he wants to truly affect regime change, then he's going to have to do that. And I don't think I know the American people aren't up for that. He may start by putting in some special forces to take over some key agencies and try to force it that way, which won't work. And then he may consider opening it up to a larger number of ground forces, which, in my opinion, would be a complete diplomatic and military disaster, to be honest with you.
Now, we're also hearing Iran getting help intelligence-wise, and given your experience, I want to ask you about that, from Russia, its ally. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth have both downplayed these reports, but why do you think they are giving Russia somewhat of a free ride?
Well, I'm sorry. I have to say that I don't really I take with a grain of salt, rather, what Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump say. I think behind the scenes, they are extremely worried. Having Russia use their satellite system, using their intelligence assets to aid Iran in locating and targeting American forces, it's a very bad thing. So no, they're not happy. And as far as them brushing it off, that's for public consumption. Behind the scenes, it's a mess right now. They are very, very concerned. And after all, why would Russia do this? Many reasons. It's payback for what America's done in Ukraine. The Americans, have provided Ukraine with our intelligence assets for many, many years. And so now Russia's doing the same thing with Iran. And also, with Russia, it's a matter of keeping an ally, keeping their word to an ally, and not losing total control over the Gulf and the allies and support they've built up over the years. They're about ready to lose all of their influence in this region, and they're going to do a lot of things to try to hold on to that influence.
So tell me then, why does the White House publicly eviscerate anyone who seems to step out against the United States, but when it's Russia, there appears to be this contrition, this hesitancy to act? I mean, this is both in Ukraine, obviously now in Iran.
Well, it's a question that everyone's been asking in this country and overseas since Donald Trump has assumed office the second time last year in January. And my professional opinion is that there's two reasons for that. One, Donald Trump seriously does like Vladimir Putin. He likes him, he idolizes him, and he has that same affection for all dictators. The second reason is, and I do believe this, that the Russians do have something on Donald Trump. I do believe that. I know that's been conspiracy theories, but a lot of the conspiracy theories about Donald Trump have in the recent weeks and months come true. I feel there is leverage, there's compromise over Donald Trump by the Kremlin. He's just done too many things since he's taken office to lead one not to believe that. This war in Iran is another reason, just as you're saying. Why is he brushing it off? Why is he just doing this when the Russians are helping his enemy, the Iranians, for whom he's just demanded an unconditional surrender? But yet the Russians can help target American assets in the area, and it's no big deal. I happen to think that the Kremlin's got something on them.
David D'Amato, retired US Army counterintelligence officer and geopolitical analyst. Thank you, as always, for your time.
You bet.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World for more. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.